On today's show, welcome to the dark side, we have cookies. This is K-Rockcast, the podcast where music and perspectives collide.
I'm Anne, a music lover who's the ultimate fan.
And I'm Kelly, a professional musician. Join us as we dive into the world of the Rose and other Korean and Asian rock bands.
Sometimes we'll agree, sometimes we'll wildly disagree, but what's guaranteed is a passionate, hilarious, and unfiltered conversation about the music that unites us and the bands that inspire us. Hi, everybody. We're back. This is our episode Into the Dream. And Kelly, we are focusing on kind of the second artist that we got the recommendations from our Patreon members that they wanted to hear if we weren't doing a deep dive into the Rose. Tell us who today's artist is, Kelly.
Today's artist is actually one of my favourite musicians. This is DPR Ian.
I am so excited because I'm taken back, Kelly, to the conversation you and I had in LA. So when we had the pleasure of kind of meeting each other for the first time during Sammy's Before We Die tour in LA, I can literally remember we are in the hotel, we're in the lobby, and we're waiting on like Monica or Idina. I can't remember if we were still getting
late.
Yeah. And you and I were sitting and we were having these great conversations about music. And you mentioned DPR Ian. And I told you, I was like, I never really heard of him before. But at that point, he was coming in my algorithm on all my social media sites. And you started telling me a little bit about his backstory and his history. And it was so fascinating. So it's so cool because it's like fast forward a year and here we are on the podcast doing our first deep dive into DPR Ian's music. I'm really excited because I know I'm going to learn so much today about his background and his music from our conversation. I know our viewers and listeners as well are probably going to learn a lot. And so we're only diving in today into 2 songs, and I think it was a challenge, right? To like,
it really was.
How deep do we go? Because there's so much to his lore and his backstory to go into, isn't there?
Yeah. I mean, literally, the guy. I mean, I think the only current artists out there that actually have more lore than him when it comes to the music is Sleep Token, which says something. He really does have an interesting backstory.
Yeah, so listeners and viewers, some of you may be already familiar with DPR Ian and his story, and tell us in the comments. As we go through, we're going to talk about So Beautiful and Ballroom Extravaganza, which I think are 2 incredible songs to start with. But if you love this and you want to know more, tell us your recommendations for additional songs for us to dive into. If you don't know DPR Ian and this is your first time hearing about him, listen to his music after today, tell us what you think. So I think either way, we probably have listeners and viewers that know a lot about him, and then maybe some that are more like me and just kind of exploring his music for the first time. So we can't wait to hear. But we're going to start with a very Kelly high-level overview of his history, because as we said, we could do an entire episode on his lore.
We probably need like 4 or 5 episodes, to be perfectly honest, because there's just so much. So, where do we start with DPR Ian?
Yeah.
So, DPR Ian, Christian Yu, or Barom Yu, and he was born in Sydney in Australia, and he attended the Wollongong High School of Performing Arts. And Christian is a drummer. That's all I'm going to say. So he started out in hardcore bands as a teenager. That's his origin story. He is a metal boy at heart, and you can kind of tell that with a lot of his music. When he around about this time as well, because it was a performing arts school, he got into the whole b-boy thing as well. So he spent time putting YouTube videos out with choreography that he was doing, and he worked under the name of B-Boy BU. which is hilarious. I mean, these videos are still out there. If you dig, you can find them. And there's,
I
you
feel
know,
like I need to find these.
they're
So
actually
listeners and viewers, if any of you know these, please tag them in the comments here on YouTube because I would love to see this.
so one of the things about Christian is he does everything. So everything you see on
Yes.
stage, he's had a hand in everything.
Yeah.
So this was the start of the choreography, and he does all the choreography for
Mm,
all of his shows anyway. And this is where he started to develop it. So after school, he studied science and art at University of Sydney. And so we're not talking about a guy here that's a bit shy of a few brain cells, I think is a nice way of describing it. And then he just thought, sod this, I'm dropping out. I mean, you can't blame him. So what he did was he decided he was going to move to Seoul, and he wanted to pursue dancing as a career, which was, you know, quite a step away from, you know, starting out as a drummer. And weirdly enough, he was street cast, and he entered into the
mm.
world of K-pop. And he would freely admit he couldn't sing at the time. He was fine. He knew music,
Yeah.
but he couldn't sing. He debuted in 2012 as Rome, obviously from the end of his name, Ballroom, in a
Mm,
boy band called Sea Clown. And that's a whole different story in itself. And there are some really scary stories relating to the whole world of
mm,
K-pop. The Zach Sang interview is very, very good, and that goes into some of the stories that he sort of experienced while he was in the whole K-pop industry, and that was under Yidang Entertainment. Following the disbanding of Sea Clown in 2015, he began building DPR, and that is Dream Perfect Regime. And this
mm,
is his empire, I think, is the only way of describing it. So
mm,
DPR was set up with DPR Cream, DPR Live, which is dabbing. I'm 100% sure most of you have probably heard of him, and DPR. Initially, he was working primarily on directing and editing the music videos for artists, obviously like DPR Live, but also Minnow, Bobby's, Loco, Amber Lou. He's done one for IU as well. I mean, he's really sort of worked the length and breadth of making music videos for some really fantastic artists. And then something changed. He kind of decided that he was going to have a go at solo work. And he always cites Daft Punk as being one of those artists that sort of became the
mm,
foundation of his solo sound. And you can hear that actually with how many fundamentals of different types of music are involved in
mm,
everything that he does. And he released as his first solo outing So Beautiful, which we're going to look at in a couple of minutes, and that was released in October 2020. One of the things we have to go into with the lore of Christian, obviously, is to do with his mental health.
mm,
We love the guy. He is not shy at coming forward regarding his mental health, his mental battles, and good on him, because this is stuff that needs to be said.
mm,
And we're so proud of him for standing there and being an advocate for the knowledge that is needed out there. So he was diagnosed as bipolar as a teenager. Then later on in his 20s, he was diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder. And this became the foundation of the lore for the egos that
mm,
you will find in all of his solo music. So this is the story of Maito and Mr. Insanity. Christian is, how do I describe it? He is the ultimate Renaissance man. And I don't say that
mm.
lightly. I mean, this isn't me blowing smoke anywhere. I mean, the guy truly, truly is. He sings, he dances, he writes, he produces, he directs, he edits, he plays every single instrument on every single track that you've heard, does the choreography, everything down to the microscopic. Whether or not this is classed as being a control freak, it might well be, but I mean, the guy has a
Mhm.
hand in absolutely everything. And obviously, the running and forming of the DPR empire, I think, is the only way of
Yeah.
describing it.
I
Um,
think when you first kind of introduced him on one of our early episodes, I feel like
yeah,
it might have been like the second episode or something
probably. Yeah,
in
yeah,
your
yeah.
artist recommendations. I remember talking a lot about that. And I think as I've just scratched the surface and kind of researching him and understanding like his story. I feel like two things I respect very heavily about him. I think it's one, what you mentioned of how he really hasn't shied away
No,
from his mental
no.
health issues, but instead used them to drive his music, which I
Mm,
think is really interesting, way to kind of accept and
yeah,
use it rather than hiding it or
yeah.
seeing it as necessarily like a burden.
No.
And then two, I just think how you just said him doing everything,
Yeah,
um, which is so fascinating. And um just knowing again like all those, it would be interesting in hearing him talk about like how he manages all those different hats, right? It's like as you know, as an independent artist running your own label, as we have had other interviews with
mm,
independent artists, how hard that is truly
yeah.
to sustain doing all of those different roles. I wonder if he loves that, if he like is just like, oh, okay, I need to do everything, but there's parts of it that he enjoys more than others. That would be interesting
Possibly.
to kind of understand that
Oh
more
yeah,
from him. But
yeah. I mean, he's one of those guys that I'd love to sit and have a conversation with because
oh yeah.
the depths of his understanding not only of music but
Mhm.
psychology is unreal.
Yes.
And
Yes.
somebody to be that self-aware is just amazing. Honestly, yeah,
Mhm.
I find him just such an interesting character. I really, really do.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you talked about the lore, and I'll say that was a little bit of a challenge for me in exploring just two songs that we
Mm,
picked, because I almost felt like I was being dropped into the lore, but I don't know like all of the backstory. And I think
yeah,
for him, I feel like with his music, it's not necessarily about one aspect. It's not about, oh, the melodies and the instrumentation, or it's not about his vocal style and his vocal prowess of being a strong
yeah.
singer. It's kind of this concept of it's all this package all together. it's
Oh
it's
yeah.
the it's the music, it's the vocals, it's the meaning of the lyrics, it's this character that he and this lore that he's developed around it.
Mm,
It will be his stage presence, it will be the music video and what he conveys. So I feel like with him it's this entire package.
oh yeah.
um so for me it was a little bit challenging. I hope I do, for any of the real fans out there, the dreamers, I hope I do it justice, as in terms of my own interpretation, with just being a little limited in understanding his full lore, but so interested to keep exploring more
Mm,
of his songs as we do this podcast. So let's jump into the first song. So Beautiful, you mentioned,
yeah.
was his debut song. It's going to be the first one we're going to dive into. This song was released on March 11th, 2021. It is part of the album Moon Swings into Order. Composition and lyrics are by DPR Ian, producer and engineer DPR Cream and DPR Ian. So why don't you kick us off, Kelly, with let's start with the melody analysis.
Right, okay, so we'll have a musical breakdown with this one. Now, as I said, he is one of my favourite musicians out there at the moment, so I must admit I tend to sort of dive a little bit deeper into people's music that I truly, truly appreciate. So I apologise in advance if we lose some people with some of this, but if anybody has any questions, just drop me a line and I'll talk you through it. Right,
I love
so
it. We're gonna get super technical.
we
This is
might get a little
awesome.
we might get a little bit technical with some of this. So Beautiful is in G minor and it's 122 beats per minute. It is a mid-tempo R&B soul track and it has these beautiful, beautiful undertones of darkness. But
Mm,
the rhythm is heavily influenced by traditional bossa nova as well.
mm,
Everything about it is pinned with bossa nova. Um, again, this is another song, and I don't know why we keep picking them or finding them, but this one has a whistle in it.
Oh my God. I I can't. Okay, we have to break down this whistle because you're right. This is the third song,
with a
right? Because
whistle.
if you count, like, the whistle is in um A Ticket to the Sky with the
Yeah,
rose. And then I guess our CN Blue,
Love
was
Cut.
that a whistle or was that more
No, there's a
like
whistle in
a
Love Cut as well. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, okay. So I feel like they're all very different meanings
very
though,
different,
kind of, which
very
is kind of
different.
interesting.
Yeah, so the whistle in this is very much a haunting refrain, and
Okay, when you say haunting, you know what I think of? Like,
go on then.
it's like the haunting of, like, it's the whistle of the serial killer as he's walking towards you, and
Nice,
you know you're gonna die.
nice.
Like, it's like that is like that where I think we said in CN Blue, it's almost like you're kind of just like crazy, you're
Yeah,
just like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
loony and you're whistling. And then in Ticket
yeah,
to the Sky, it's like this contentment,
yeah,
because you've moved through the
yeah, yeah,
struggle
yeah.
and everything, and you've come out the other side. But this one's like we're
This
in
one's
the we're in the horror movie,
this one's psychotic.
and
This one's
this
psychotic.
one's psychotic.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's
Yes.
haunting, and but in all seriousness, apparently that's the noise that Christian actually hears when he goes into a manic depressive state.
Wow.
So
Wow.
apparently he does hear a whistle, and he knows that that's the moment in time that he's taken a dive.
Wow. Mm.
So that's quite interesting that he's actually personified that in music, which is why it is this haunting
Yeah.
refrain. And that's kind of
Right.
it's kind of a bit like, ooh, it's very primordial.
It
Yeah,
is.
it is.
Right. Right.
So the orchestral strings are primarily violins, and they again add to this cinematic horror feel. So we get
Yeah.
this movie, and it just keeps building, especially towards the end of the track.
I
And
mean, you're laughing. You laughed when you read, like, my notes ahead of time,
I
because
did.
what did I write in my notes?
I did
Do
you
you
say it
remember?
was like there's like something like being was it dancing with Dracula or something like that?
Yes.
I can't
I
remember
was
the
like,
exact terminology.
yeah, there's like this sense of impending doom. Like, I'm dancing with a vampire and he's seducing me and he's about to, like, bite my neck and drain me of blood, but I'm gonna like it.
No, you see, this is the thing. This is the difference between us. You're like, this is impending doom, and I'm just like, hello, take me. See, this is where we work out the fact that I have definite goth leanings.
You know what? I might be Tinkerbell, but I must have a sus side because I'm like, hey, I think I'm gonna like this.
Possibly,
I think
yeah,
I'm down for the
possibly.
ride.
Yeah, yeah, more than likely. We ended up having quite a funny conversation about it, didn't we? And we ended up getting into our weird psychology about ourselves, and I was just like,
Oh
oh my god, I've just realised that I am literally a gothic damsel. It's like I always go for the monster that's like, he's a monster, but it's okay, he's alright inside.
no. I love it. I love it. I love
I think
it.
that just says something about me. So, gentlemen, I need a library. Oh god, just give me a vampire or a werewolf any day of the week. I'm fine. Anyway,
I
going
love
back
it.
into it. Right, so these strings build, and especially towards the end of the track, so you do get this impending doom, as Anne says, that builds towards the end of the track. That is, it's almost like you know that this thing is behind you, and it's going to come up, and it's going
Yeah.
to get you. And
Yeah.
and that's the thing, and I think that is the premise of the entire track, even though it's so
Yeah.
beautiful and could be taken
Mhm.
as like, you're singing about the love of being, so beautiful, but it's not. But we'll get onto that in a bit. The traditional harmony is represented by the piano, and the main chords are built around G-7 and A-7, which is half diminished territory. So that's another reason that you feel ever so slightly uneasy, and you've got that
Okay,
impending
so tell me
feeling of
more.
doom.
Tell me more what you mean by like half diminished territory. Like, what does
Right.
that mean?
So like when you're into like minor chords, that's the uneasy bit.
Mm,
So whereas major chords are happy, major chords are like ding, ding,
mm,
ding, minor chords are like no, and that's why
mm.
like when you play blues, it tends to be more in minor chords. When you're diminished, it's between the two.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
it's kind of clever. So you end up in this sort of like do
Yeah.
session. So you're like,
Ooh, I'm
you're
really
very
loving this
uneasy.
because we haven't, obviously we're getting a little, I don't want to get too far ahead in the meaning of the true meaning behind the song, but like if I can take this thread you're talking about, this kind of in between state between these major chords that evoke more
It's
of a
clever.
happy emotion and these
Uh-huh.
minor chords that are evoking more of this melancholy,
Yeah.
and knowing then what we've talked about with his mental health and these personalities and what we'll get into in what the song's truly about, that is so clever,
Yeah.
so clever.
And of
Love
course
that.
and there's a D7 in there as well, just for good measure.
Mm,
Just throw that in the end. The guitar is completely and utterly bossa nova. There's no other way of describing it. That guitar is
mm,
literally from the tablature of bossa nova, and it gives it that rhythmic feel. That's why you get
mm.
that. You get that sort of feel to it. You want to move to it, even though you're feeling slightly uneasy. Yeah.
Yes, that goes back to me feeling like I'm dancing with the vampire. You definitely want to move your body to this song.
Yeah, exactly. And then in the
Mhm.
bridge, we have a change of chord progression as well. So
Mm,
when he sings Love Turning Grey, the strings build with prominence as well. And then this is where you get this
mm,
chord progression change. That's clever stuff, Mr. U. That's clever stuff. And this
mm,
is why I say he's one of my favourite musicians, because he's not frightened of just right. He doesn't think that his audience is dumb. He isn't
mm,
frightened of being progressive. He isn't
mm,
frightened of throwing a new idea, because he knows that his audience will listen to it and go, okay, we're going on
mhm,
this journey, I'm with you. And I think some artists are frightened of that, so they tend to stick behind kind of formulaic stuff, whereas he doesn't. He
mhm.
just goes, fuck it, let's go for it. But yeah, big fan of this song.
Yeah. I loved, I think as you're talking about the piano, piece, like, I kinda loved when they come in around particularly at about a minute 30, and it's when he's
Mm,
saying, "I'm not that crazy," but those chords on the piano literally, like, kind of have this crazy
yeah,
sound to them.
that's
So I
it.
just love that contradiction
Yeah,
again.
yeah,
I thought that was so clever. And then I like the horns that come in, like, after
yes,
the bridge. I thought that
yeah.
was a nice touch. And then he ends his vocals at the end where he's just like just his voice, and he's just, like, so beautiful. I think that kinda ending is
And
very, again, haunting.
it's haunting, but it's like a whisper, isn't it, that trails off? It's
It
like a vaporous
is.
trail. That's really
Yes.
beautiful. I like that. It's just got
Yes.
and it's like this thing. It's not melancholy. It
Mm.
isn't that. It's
Yeah.
haunting, but it's
I
like
yes.
sexual and
Yes.
seducing haunting.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Yes.
It's yeah.
That's why I said, like, I keep going back to this dancing with the band, but you're right. It's like you feel sad.
No.
It doesn't evoke that feeling out of you. It evokes this, like, very arousing, but
Mhm.
uncomfortably arousing. Like, I don't know if I should feel aroused, but I'm liking this. Like I said, that's like how I feel when I
Yeah,
listen to this song. I
yeah.
was just
It's
like,
like
should I be liking this? But I am. Like, I'm down. I don't know if I should be down, but I'm down. All right, let's play a clip for our listeners and viewers.
Let's take a trip down a dark place, baby. Look for me now, I'm not that crazy. Let's talk about what makes you happy, 'cause I know I'm calling for you. Come get your funky love story. I love it when the skies can't sleep. I left a message encased in me. So bye bye, so bye bye. You're so
Welcome to the dark side. We have cookies.
I like cookies.
We all like cookies.
I like cookies. I'm down.
I'm sorry.
I had to pick that clip because I felt like it like perfectly kind of embodied what we
Oh
just
yeah,
described in this
definitely.
song.
Oh yeah, without,
So this is a good transition. Let's now talk about, Kelly, what he's actually talking about in this song,
yeah.
because it's not some love song here.
No, this isn't a love song at all. This is, we're going to get deep here. This is the internal battle between him and Maito. This
Mm.
is the exploration of the beauty that's hidden in the darkness of his inner demons. If you think of Maito as kind of being like his fallen angel, and that even the downs create something that is so beautiful.
Yes, right.
Um, yeah.
That's exactly what I felt like. It's like finding the beauty in the monster
Mm,
inside you.
yeah, it is.
And I
Yeah,
think literally he's dealing with his alter personality, Mido.
yeah,
So he's literally dealing with a quote monster inside me. Like I like the lyric, I left a message encased in me.
yeah,
I like that lyric because I felt like to me that's him describing this alternate personality, like maybe when one personality is dominant and the
yes,
other is hidden,
yes.
then the change, right, happens, and then you're kind of like, okay, what happened while I was inside? you
Yeah,
know
there is that sort of thing of Jekyll and Hyde with it,
right,
definitely.
right. Hmm.
And but I think the really, really interesting thing is the fact that he's managed to harness
Mm,
this these alter egos, and they allow him to write these different forms of music. So obviously, I mean, we're in Maito territory here. We're being pulled from
mhm.
Christian into Maito, but then we get Mr. Insanity, and Mr. Insanity is the other end of the spectrum. Mr. Insanity is like the manic high that you get with it.
Now,
Um,
he has said in some of the interviews that I've been trying to watch to explore his background more, that he literally does writing of songs in these
in the
different
character, yeah,
personalities. Do
yeah,
you
he
know
does,
if
yeah.
he wrote So Beautiful when he was in his Mido personality?
I don't know for definite, but I could hazard a
Mm.
guess that he did. I think so. I get that
As we're
feeling with the
talking, it
language.
feels
Yeah,
like it,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because it's
Um,
almost a little bit like maybe the perspective voice, it could be Mido.
yeah, it feels a bit like that. It can, and you sort of wonder whether or not which character's going to win out with this,
Right.
which personality is going to take the forefront. And that's one of the things. I mean, obviously, we saw that clip of the video earlier on because that video sort of shows the true
Mm,
darkness at the core of this song. I mean, there's a
mm.
bit where he's literally like stumbling in the woods, and it's like he's just woken up, and it's very much, silly as it sounds, like a werewolf story. It's very
Right.
much like you've transformed, and then you wake up as yourself in the middle of nowhere, and it's like, dear God, what have I done?
Mhm.
And this
Right.
is kind of the feeling that you get with this song as well. There's a feeling of possession, of almost being like possessed by something, and
Right.
and and then there's like the rain in the video, but you can also you get that feeling as well in the actual lyrics and the singing of it. It's very much the predominant sort of core of the story. It's that
Mhm.
sort of lost and found, and are you or aren't you, and but I think there's also that acceptance of who you are as well, which is
I
really
think
interesting.
Yeah, I think so too. Like I like the lyrics where he says, "Let's take a trip down a dark place, baby. Look for me now. I'm not that crazy. Let's talk about what makes you happy, 'cause I know I'm calling for you."
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it's like it is exploration of this darker side.
Mhm.
And I think we all, like, obviously he is a um, his story is very specific to his mental health, but I think we all have a darker side,
Oh, yeah.
right? I think we all have this kind of other side to ourselves. And I feel like he's saying in this, don't shy away from that. Don't act like you don't have that, but instead accept it, embrace it, and
Yeah.
find the beauty in that
Yeah.
because that is you as well, right?
Exactly.
That's part of who you are as well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The line, "My love turning grey and my heart is
Mm,
looking the other way." Now, that might be the way that he views the complexity of his relationship with his condition.
mm,
I mean, that could very well be, that's him sort of expressing how he feels towards somebody else as well. I mean, there's this thing with it where it's like he's crying out for someone to understand him
mm.
and to
Yeah.
understand all the phases of him, and to someone to see the monster as the beautiful chaos magnet that it truly
Mm,
is. Because that's the thing. There is beauty in darkness. There is,
mm,
and as we've said, I am obviously, I am the girl that always fell for the monster in every single gothic tale because that's just me. But to me, this is kind of like when you read or watch Frankenstein, your empathy sits with the
mm,
monster. It doesn't sit with Frankenstein because the true monster is Frankenstein.
mhm,
And if this is written from the viewpoint of from his Mito persona,
mm,
is that him then looking at Christian as being the Frankenstein within the relationship?
mm,
And I find that quite an interesting balance as well. I mean, dependent on where it was written, or is it written as Christian and he's sat on this fence balancing between the two?
mm.
Am I
Yeah.
going to tip either way?
Mm,
But yeah, there's something so interesting and lovely about it, and the fact that it's a love of self story, which
mhm.
is which is interesting, and I really quite like that, and it's a little bit different, and I think that's
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's why his music resonates with a lot of people as well.
Yeah, I like what you're saying. It is a love of self story, but in a very different way. Um, in a little bit of a, darker way.
Mm,
Um, but I resonate very much with meanings of love of self. I think personally, maybe because it's something I've struggled with my whole life,
mm,
and so I think I really am drawn to songs that and artists that really promote, and I think he does as well, loving yourself for who you are truly and embracing all aspects, good, bad, ugly, beautiful,
yeah,
and not
yeah,
trying to be something you aren't. I'm really drawn to artists and music that focus on that. And I think you're right. This song to me, that's the core of the message of this
yeah.
song.
I
Um,
I heard something earlier on actually. There was a resonance with it, not only
mm,
for myself, but also I think it kind of tuned into what this song was as well. And
mm,
it was sort of saying that you do yourself a disservice by not allowing yourself to be truly seen.
mm, mm,
And by not being yourself and expressing yourself, that is almost it's placing a mirror of your trust of another. How
mm,
you view yourself, you place upon another, and then that's how they
mm,
begin to view it. Whereas if you express yourself as a flawed being, which is what he's doing on
mm.
this, he is truly admitting that
Yeah.
he isn't flawless. In fact, one of the lines mentions flawless in it. And it's that thing of understanding that to connect with other people outside of your own
Mm,
personas, you need to be raw, you need to be vulnerable, and that is a way of trusting somebody else, of putting
mhm.
your faith in
Yeah.
another person. um so I think if you were to sort of take on this and say, actually, do you know what, this could be a love story. I think it's an internal love story, but I think there's a sort of,
Right.
there is that question of, will anybody ever understand me about it? But because
Mm.
he's so raw and vulnerable about this, and it's so open, I think it does allow, it's that surrender into somebody else, which is a very beautiful thing.
Mm. Yeah, and a scary thing, right?
Scary
It's
as hell.
I mean, it's one of the most terrifying things I think in the human experience we can go through is
Mm,
truly surrendering yourself to another person,
yeah,
opening yourself up in
yeah,
that
definitely.
way. Yeah. Yeah, I love this one. This is a pretty popular one, right, for
Oh
him?
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. We're talking
Yeah.
millions upon millions of streams of this track. Definitely,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, this is a great one. Well, viewers and listeners, tell us what you think of So Beautiful. What's your interpretation of what DPR Ian is talking about? We want to hear kind of your thoughts because his music is so deep. I think there's can be so many different interpretations of it. So
Mm,
it leads to really rich
yeah,
discussions
it
and
does.
conversations. So take us in, Kelly. Why don't we break down Ballroom Extravaganza? Kind of walk us through the details of this song.
So Ballroom Extravaganza, again, is from Mood Swings Into Order, which is possibly one of my favourite album titles of all time,
I know, very
Round,
creative.
apart from Mood Swings and Roundabouts, which is one of my other favourite album titles. So this was released on the 26th of July in 2022. Lyrics were by DPR Ian. It was composed by DPR Ian and DPR Cream, and the vocals were arranged by DPR Ian, and the music was arranged by DPR Ian, DPR Cream, and Ampoff. It was produced by DPR Ian and DPR Cream. These guys do everything in-house. They are
Mhm.
the ultimate independents. They literally do the lot themselves, and all shout to them because that is impressive to be able to do the entire gamut of everything. So if we go into the sort of melody analysis of this and I sort of break down the music side of it, this is in F major. It's 145 beats per minute. It's alternative R&B, it's dark pop, and it's electronica, but due to the theatrical nature, it lends itself very much, and it's had comparisons to My Chemical Romance. I can
Mm.
see that. I understand that. I know where that's coming from. It has got this pomp and circumstance to it and this theatricality that you don't get anywhere
Mhm.
else. And I think that's kind of cool, to be perfectly honest. There is a very definite conflicting tone and clash of instruments during this. Um, and it's quite clever. So you get guitars in there that are distorted, and then you get acoustic guitars in there. You've got a mixture of an acoustic drum kit and an electronic drum kit. You've got a synth piano in there and a piano. Can you see? You've got this sort of very, very acoustic sound, but then you've got this electronic sort of
Mm.
depth beneath it. Obviously, on top we've got the brass, and I mean that's fantastic. You've got strings in there, and then when we get onto the bass, now one of the things you will soon learn about DPR Ian is the man knows how to do a bass line. There are some beautiful bass lines in all of his stuff.
Yeah. I remember you talking about that with his background when we did just an intro
Yeah,
to him in that early podcast because he's a drummer by trade, but has he also been a bass player? Do I
he plays
remember that or
he
am I
plays
making that up?
no, he plays literally every instrument you can throw at him. No word of a lie. He plays everything. I don't think there's an instrument he doesn't play, but he plays bass on tour. So if you ever see him
Mm.
live, he'll
Yeah,
play bass, and he
I
normally
thought I
plays.
remember you saying that. Yeah.
He doesn't tend to play a 4 string bass though. You'll see him play a 5 or a
Mm.
6 string bass because he tends to get quite deep notes in it. So obviously the more strings you have on a bass,
Mm.
the deeper you can go. Um,
Mm.
so he really does have this sort of thick, luscious rhythmic
Mm.
section to everything he does, and I think that is primarily with him being traditionally a bass, a bass and drummer at heart. So you
Yeah.
find it, you do find it with drummers. They do tend to sort of fixate on that side, but that's not a bad thing because that's the bit that gets people moving. The guitars are clean and then distorted, so it starts with this picked acoustic guitar,
I
which
loved this start with
it's
this picked
beautiful.
guitar.
It's so
I
beautiful because
loved
it's
it.
just kind of like this wandering thought. It's like meandering, and it,
Yeah.
or it's kind of got that sort of, because it's in standard 4/4 time as well. It's got that what kind of waltz ballroom feel to it. So you kind of get that,
Yeah.
yeah, Once Upon a Dream thing about it. It's kind of, you fall into Cinderella territory with it very, very quickly. So you can
Mhm.
understand why it's ballroom extravaganza. However, the section ends with this lovely sort of A sharp minor seventh chord, and then that gives you like an upswell into a rock song. So it allows it to
Mm.
pivot from this sort of waltzing sound, and then it sort of kicks in. So then you get the distortion, and that then leads to these strummed chords that add more urgency to what's happening. And then
Mm.
obviously, the distortion kicks in and the electronic guitar starts to take over, and it starts to build and build and build. Because this is what he's really good at. He's really, really good at building tension and releasing it.
Yeah. I noted that. So I love
Yeah.
your background and knowledge, allows you to talk so technical where, I come from like feeling. So like, but I think it's so cool because I kind of said the same thing just in very layman listener terms. Because where you were talking about that, to me, it's like it starts with that picked guitar, and then I can hear like this drum come in, and then I can hear the full melody push, and it like pushes you into that chorus. It's like driving,
Yeah.
and then the beat just drops again
Yeah.
back to that picked guitar through like the second verse. And so you're right, it's this swell, it's this building, and then this drop that he does. I think he
Yeah.
does that so well.
He's so good at that. He uses that a lot in all of
Mm.
his music. It's one of his party tricks, definitely.
Mhm.
And one of the nice things about this bass has just got this solid, steadfast gallop to it. There's no other way of describing
Mm.
it. It's a gallop, but that's very much his style, which is lovely. And you can pick that up again in a lot of his work. So the drums are standard, very, very standard, like 4/4. They're not doing anything weird and unusual, but he adds like elements of pace and dynamic change. It's that little bit again of it puts you on edge, because you're expecting just a, and it doesn't. You've got something in there that just goes, and you're like, oh, and it makes you flinch a little bit, because you've just got this tension that's added, because he's just like, oh, I'm going to check if you're paying attention here. And that's what he
Mm.
does. And then one of my favorite things in this entire track is the voice manipulation. And this is
Yeah.
all the way through it. But this is great because this is, and he does this two ways. So he manipulates his voice naturally just by doing
Mm.
multiple tracks, but he also has slight phasing and bits and pieces in there that just add a little bit of crunch and dynamic to it. So one of the things you will notice about Christian Yu is he has this really beautiful baritone. The man has a gorgeous deep voice, and he uses it to introduce Maito, and he just his dark
Mm.
side, and you'll just get this very sort of deep sort of, it's got a sinister edge to it, and it's got that
Yeah,
sort of, yeah,
I I said his vocals seemed like, this is my technical terms, talky. Like, I don't
yeah,
know quite what I meant by that, but I think it's just like, to me, it's not necessarily like his vocal delivery is this like, you know, and I don't mean this as a negative, but to me is so far, and I've only listened, to a few songs, obviously, but his vocal delivery is not necessarily like he's this strong, powerful, he's hitting these notes and you're just like, wow, he's like belting it out like a Younghwa. Like, he's not like
mm,
Younghwa from like CN Blue. It sounds more conversational or like talky, but I think to me it goes back to what I said. Like, I don't think his music is about one aspect necessarily, where
no,
some artists, like maybe for CN Blue, there's, the vocal part is a huge part, and his
yeah,
ability as a vocalist is a
yeah,
major aspect of
yeah,
CN Blue and their sound. I feel like with DPR Ian, it's just everything all together comes together as the package. It's not necessarily like he's known as this vocal
Oh,
for like his vocal paralysis
he,
or whatever. Because I mean, he's
yeah,
even
no,
said in his interviews he was shocked when he got like tapped because they were like, "Do you sing?" He's like, "No, not really."
yeah,
You know, like,
exactly, yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. It's like,
yeah,
I can kind of hold a tune. Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
no, he isn't. I mean, that is, but I think that's one of the things I like about him. He's a storyteller. That's the thing.
Yes. Oh,
He's a
yes.
he's a
Yeah.
storyteller, and it's more to
Mhm,
do with him telling a story than it is
mhm.
about him being a caged bird let free. Some people
Right.
are natural singers, and they are, they're the finch in the cage type of thing. He
Mhm.
isn't. He's the sort of gremlin that's sat there that's telling you the tale type of thing.
Yeah, right.
But the thing is, he knows how to use his voice. He knows what his instrument is. He knows
Yes.
that what his range is, and he knows how to use it. And he knows how to use it very cleverly. So
Mm.
he doesn't stick to the same tropes and trills all the time either. That is one
Yeah.
thing. When you start listening to him, you'll start to realize that actually he very cleverly uses the instrument that he's got. It might
I
not.
think yeah, I think that's a great way to describe it because it kinda goes back to what we've said about him in general. He's so intelligent in terms of how he's figured out how to take everything about himself
Mhm.
and use it in the most effective way.
Yeah,
Or right? Like, and I think his voice style, as you're describing,
yeah,
he's kind of done. The other thing I noticed that I just loved about this was this sound, Kelly, of this flick of a lighter.
yeah.
Is that what that sound is? Did I
It is what
identify
that
that right?
sound
You
is.
know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it
Yes,
is.
I loved that.
It is. And it's such an interesting bit of like sound design to put in there.
Yes,
It's
yes,
not
I love
necessarily
that.
something that you'd expect, but he's
No,
very good at
no.
that. He's very good at just sort of like picking random little noises. And the more
Mhm,
you listen to his stuff, the more you'll hear in it. And there'll
mhm,
be very strange sounds, and you'll just be like, but it's kind of a weird thing. I kind of see that as sort of like if you're in this fog of depression
mm,
or whatever it is, and then there'll just be like this one noise that snaps you out of it, whether it is like
mm,
the flick of a cigarette lighter or something like that,
mm,
the actual flints clicking. And I think that's what it is. I think it's that
mm,
sort of break of reverie, which would also go back to the idea of it being a ballroom and sort of like this beautiful extravaganza and everything else. And yeah, so I mean, there is that sort of, it's like that pull you back to reality thing, which is quite nice.
mhm. Yeah.
Um, so one of the things I also find really lovely about the fact that when he does this really sinister voice is it's like we were
Mm,
saying earlier on, it goes back into this primordial thing, and it's just
mhm,
got that edge of so if we have any fantasy readers out there, you'll know exactly what I'm going to say now, but it's got that edge of bad girl about it,
mm.
and it's that dangerous aspect, and it's like you should run because the bad wolf is going to come in and eat you, but you're like, but he's such a pretty doggy, I want to pet him. It's that kind of thing, if you know what I mean. It's like,
I
you're going to
know,
end up
I'm
in
telling
trouble
you,
and this is no good for you, but God, I'm staying
I
around for
feel
it.
I feel like DPR Ian is like, or at least his persona. I mean, Christian Yu as a person, he could be like the most gentle, like,
He's an absolute
whatever.
puppy.
Yeah, but I feel like he's just like this ultimate like bad boy that I
Oh God,
shouldn't
yeah.
like, but I want to like, and it's
I
just like
want to
he like,
like him. Yeah,
oh my
you want to
god,
like him. Is everything
yeah.
your mother told you to stay away from.
I feel like he is. I feel like he's like this like lighter and I'm just this moth and I'm just drawn in and I'm probably going to
Yeah.
get burnt and die, but I'm going to enjoy it while it lasts.
Hey, at least you had fun.
That's right. Cookies, man. Cookies. All right. Let's look at a clip, listeners and viewers, from this great song, Ballroom Extravaganza.
To a halt, the birds won't sing for you anymore, not like before. When the trees are all burning, all the stars will keep on turning, and I know I won't stop searching for the moment when the world stopped for you. It stopped for you. Then the world came crashing.
One of the really nice things about that clip that you've just shown as well, it actually gives you that chorus vocal swell. And it swells to this like controlled scream. And that just leads you very much into like the lyrics and what the lyrics have got their background in. And I think that's also a nice peek at Mr. Insanity coming in as well. So we've got Mito in this. And
I
we've
know.
got
I feel like
Christine in
I've
this, and,
only
Mr.
explored.
Insanity's
I
knocking
know. I
on the
feel like I've
door.
only explored Mito, so I have to keep going with his music so I can better understand like his
Yeah.
Mr. Insanity personality. All right, so let's talk about the lyrics on this one. What's your interpretation of the lyrics?
So he actually defines it as the definition of waiting for the perfect moment. And it's this thing of, it's almost like it's a fixation of a singular desire. It's almost like I've got to have this. And it's honing in on that one thing of like perfection being the ultimate part of it. Now, it sort of captures this sort of like intense isolation that you get with mental health. And like the only way when you're in the depths of despair, it's like you only see the way out as that pinprick of light. And that is like you pin all your hope on that pinprick of light and you're clinging on to something so desperately. But what happens is you cling on to it so much that you actually push it away. And I to me, that's kind of what these vocals are. It's sort of like grasping and holding on and clinging and having all that sort of hope and want of this sort of perfection. But by doing that, you just sort of, you push it away. It's like, as I said to you the other day, it's like the analogy of grasping onto wet soap. You hold wet soap and it just goes... And that's kind of how I feel with this song. I mean, there is this, it's very definitely a song of heartbreak and of longing and of wanting, but it's also this idolized concept of perfection. And I think that sometimes comes along with a depressive state.
I'll admit, I was struggling a lot with figuring out, like, what is this song about? Like, what is he talking about? Because I feel like you're right. Like, to me, on the very outside, it's this loss, it's this longing. But then I feel like, as we've been saying throughout this entire conversation, he's so much deeper than that. So then I was like challenging myself. I was like, okay, like that's the surface, but like what might he really be trying to convey? And I just feel like I don't know, maybe all his songs aren't necessarily about his battle with his multiple alter egos, but I feel like I kind of now keep going to that as like my go-to on interpreting maybe his lyrics. And I don't know if that's doing him a disservice, because I'm sure maybe in more of his songs he talks about other things, not always just those things. But I think I struggled with like figuring out what I felt this song was about, other than this sense of loss and this sense of longing for, I was interpreting it as a person that wasn't there. And so then I'm like, is that his feeling loss of when he loses Christian to these other alter egos? Is that his mourning a little bit? And I don't know. I admit I tried to reach for you once more. I know you won't find me anymore. Like, some of those lines felt like he's he's talking about the loss of Christian to these
It's
other alter
almost like he
egos.
loses himself, and he sometimes panics that
Yeah.
Christian's never gonna come back.
Yeah, that's a better way maybe to kind of
Yeah.
articulate a little bit
It's
what
like,
I'm trying
will
to
he truly
say.
lose himself one of these days? Will these alter egos become
Yeah,
the reality? I mean, one of my
right.
favorite lines in it
Mm.
is the bridge, where it's all the king's horsemen and all the king's men. They couldn't put you back together again. Oh, when the story comes to an
Yeah.
end, will it be the same again for you? And I
Well, I
mean,
love that is so clever. What do
I
you think
love
that
those
means?
lyrics.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's that sort of, it's that power, it's that control, it's that
Mm.
when everything comes together, can and everything happens and falls apart, because obviously we're talking
Mm.
Humpty Dumpty here, aren't we? Um,
Right, right.
and I
Mhm.
mean, that's probably how he feels. Like,
Yeah.
a manic depressive state, he's smashed on the floor. So, I mean, what happens when he can gather himself and come back together? And can he
Mhm.
come back together? Can he literally glue the pieces of himself back together to be who he needs to be? It's that sort of thing of, it's just like, can I maintain who I am? And I think
Yeah.
the loss and the longing that possibly relates to the relationship in this is how his fluctuating mental state affects somebody else. Can they
Yeah, yeah.
deal with
Yeah.
his ongoing story and these fluctuations and
Mhm.
everything that goes with it? Um,
Yeah.
but I think you see that in a lot of his stuff. I think a lot of it is the fear of knowing who he is,
Mhm.
and how his disorder affects how other people see him and other people perceive him, and how other people deal with him as well.
So what do you think the title how does the title connect, Ballroom Extravaganza? How do you think the title connects? He says it in one line on the Ballroom Extravaganza. I know you won't find me anymore. I tried to reach for you once more, but the world came crashing to the ground. So what's the Ballroom Extravaganza to him then, do you think?
I wonder if it's like this whirly, because the thing is, like, I mean,
Mm,
I don't know if anybody's ever been to a ball or anything, like, had that experience, but I mean, most sort of music that you would dance to at a ball is very cylindrical. It's very
mm,
whirling. You get dizzy from it. And I think that's
mm,
possibly what it is. I think it's this sort of nod between the sort of, he's never stationary. He's never stationary as a
mm.
person. And I think that's the thing. It's like he's going back to Francis Doom and his ideology of it being sort of like a ballroom in space in fire.
Yeah, that's right.
I think
Yeah.
that's kind of where we are in this territory with Christian
Mm.
as well. I think it's how it's his mind palace. I think the ballroom is his mind palace.
Ooh, that's a good metaphor. Yeah.
Yeah,
I can
and
definitely see I love what you're saying on this kind of thought line of this, when you're dancing in a ball and you're going round and round and round and how
yeah, and
he
everything's
probably
just this
does.
like rush around you. It's like you're in the
Yeah.
center of a maelstrom. I think is probably the way of describing it.
Mm. I wonder how just kind of thinking out loud, like, I I hope that his writing of his music and telling his story in the way that he does and how we've said he's so intelligently using it to shape his lore. I hope it helps him cope, and deal with all of this because
Mm.
wow, I can't even begin to imagine what it must be like.
No, I don't think anybody could ever have any comprehension of what that is like, to be honest.
Mm.
I think there's a lot of people out there who can understand what depression is. I think there's a lot of people out there that have undiagnosed bipolar syndrome. Apparently, that is something that has drastically increased
Mm,
since the advent of COVID.
mm,
Um,
mm.
at the end of the day, the mind is quite literally a rubber band. It will only stretch so far before it snaps. And it's kind of scary to think that we aren't being open enough about mental health. And as I said, I
Mm,
think he's such a good advocate for it. I think
yeah.
most musicians use music as a way of channeling healing. I think we all
Mm,
do. It's whether it's a diary entry or whether it's therapy or whatever it is. I think we all do that.
mm,
Even drummers. Drummers get it out in a physical form and just hit things. And there's lots of scientific evidence out there as well about the effects of music on the brain. And if you look at the recent sort of studies relating to things like dementia,
mm,
there is a lot of understanding relating to how sort of fixed points of music can actually help trigger how the brain reacts, and it can have a positive effect on it. So I should imagine that when it comes to having the ability to write, when he's having an episode and when
mm,
he delves into one of his other personas and egos, that it allows him to maintain a level of balance. He becomes that
mm,
center of the storm by creating music. Whereas I think if he didn't have music or he didn't have a creative outlet, he wouldn't
mhm.
have that balance.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it is something that he uses, and he uses it well, and he uses it in a very clever way.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
very
I
much
really do.
so. Well, I think that was an amazing conversation. As I said at the top of the episode, I knew I would learn so much more through just talking with you into his music. I'm excited. Listeners and viewers, tell us what you think of Ballroom Extravaganza, but just overall, tell us what you think of these deep dives into DPR Ian's music. I think it's definitely going to be an artist, Kelly, we're going to talk more about because obviously his music leads to really rich discussion. So I'm sure
Yeah.
there'll be more opportunities for us to deep dive into more songs by him.
There's so many other tracks that I want to look at. Oh, I mean, getting to just to choose these two was really hard work. I think
It was,
I think
wasn't it? We went back and forth a lot.
I think I threw about 10 at you and went, I want to do this one, and I want to do this one, and I want to do this one, and I want to do this one.
Yeah,
But yeah,
it was hard to narrow it down, but I think we picked two really good
oh
tracks.
yeah,
Obviously, it
definitely.
led to
Yeah.
some good discussion. So let's do some fun with DPR Ian. I've got a would you rather scenario that is centered on him. So if you remember, listeners and viewers, we talked about the creepy whistle during So Beautiful. So Kelly, your first option is you have to do that creepy whistle like you're a psychopath and you're ready to, you know, take everybody out that you're walking around at full volume in public. So you're going to creep everybody out that you're around by doing that creepy whistle.
Okay.
Or you have to imitate DPR's classic head tilt smile move every time you talk to someone. So I feel like this one needs a little visual because, again, not everyone watching this episode may be familiar by this head tilt smile we're talking about. Right. There's that classic head tilt with his like smile. Also very sinister. So I feel like these are kind of two sinister options. Which are you gonna do?
I'm a spooky girl. I don't mind doing either.
I know you're like, I'll be creepy in front of everybody either way.
I
It's
don't
a
mind.
win-win for you.
That's a win-win for me. Hey, when I grow up, I want to be Morticia Adams. You know what we do with roses, don't you?
I
Um,
just love that like head tilt and then that like smile.
I hate, I hate to say it, I have been known to do that. Sort of like,
You already do that? Wait, I think I've gotten that head tilt look though. Like, and
you had the head tilt smile at me before, so I know I already do that. I don't mind. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I've been known to whistle in public as well, and that's probably quite sinister. I remember once doing it around my grandma, and my grandma being a very, very, very religious lady, and also a how should we put it, superstitious lady. I remember
Ooh.
I remember walking through the graveyard with her when I was probably about 13 or something like that, and me whistling, and she's like, "Don't do that! You'll call the spirits." It
Oh my
started
goodness.
young with me. That's all I'm saying.
I love that. I love that.
So to be perfectly honest,
Ooh.
I don't know. I'd probably do either. So what about you? What would be yours? Would you publicly whistle, or would you just do the sinister head tilt?
You know what? You know me, Kelly. I feel like I don't think I could pull off the head tilt and smile. Like, I think it would look like, instead of it looking actually sinister and creepy, people would be like, I'm sorry, is something wrong with you? Like,
Yeah.
sorry. As you would say, like, is your carer
Come on, your
around?
neck. You need to rub it. Come here, let me rub your neck.
Like, I feel like I don't think I could pull off that in the same way. So
I don't think you could either, to be
I think I'm
honest.
gonna go whistle. Cause I'm a good whistler.
You're a
So
good whistler.
I'm a good
Yeah.
whistler. I could hang with his whistle.
Yeah, there you go. I
Maybe
think,
that would
yeah.
creep people out more than my head tilt and smile. But
I mean, to be
yeah, like
perfectly honest, I did either of these two, and it won't creep anybody out. They just got Kelly's being Kelly.
I know, I don't have enough sinisterism.
I just picked my tea up and my. That's what the thud was, folks. I'm sorry. Good God. Only I'd have a metal coaster, because that makes sense, doesn't it?
Oh. All right, so you could do either. Which one are you gonna pick, though?
I think I'd probably do the head tilt, because I just do it frequently anyway.
I know. No, I think you've got more of like I don't know, like a mystery about you. Like you can pull that off, I think.
I've got more of a mystery about me. Seriously.
Yeah.
You know, I'm an
I
absolute
think
geek.
you're
I love how it's like, Kelly has this air of mystery about her. No, Kelly is an absolute nerd and a geek and a bit of a dork, to be perfectly honest, when you know me.
I know when you get to know you, but I think you can come off as like this cool, like
I do. Or as the lads say, they always say, you come off with a black cat energy to start with, and then people get to know you and know that you're an absolute stupid Labrador.
I totally agree.
Yeah,
So I think
yeah.
you could pull this off with your black cat energy.
Yeah, I am
Yeah.
definitely. When you first meet me, I'm definitely black cat.
Yeah, I love that. All right, listeners and viewers, tell us what you would do. Are you going to do the sinister whistle from So Beautiful at full volume in public to creep the people around you? Or are you going to imitate his classic head tilt and smile every time you have to talk to someone? Tell us which you would pick. Please rate our podcast. Leave us comments on this episode. Again, tell us what you think of these deep dives of these other artists. We love to hear your feedback. Are there more artists you'd like us to do these deep dives into, as we want to kind of expand more of the artists that we're talking about? Follow us on social media if you don't already: Instagram, TikTok, X, and YouTube. We are at KROK_cast all across the board.
Click here to subscribe.
We're also on Patreon. Join us on Patreon as a paid member for great benefits like exclusive content, fun bloopers, virtual hangouts, and discounts on KRockCast merchandise. Email us at krock.cast@gmail.com. And don't forget our website, www.krockcast.com. All right, see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hello, this is Juju Be Good. You're watching and listening to K-Rock Cast. Check out their podcast and K-Rock Recommends for my music and other great independent artists.